Hello and welcome to this video. I'm going to be giving you my reflection slash analysis slash review of the video game South Park: The Stick of Truth. Now, there is a trope of the problem with licensed games. And what this basically means is that games that are based on a TV show or a film or an animated TV show are almost universally crap. They are bad, really, really bad. And I can give you a few examples. The Pixar ones like Ratatouille, the Simpsons games, several Star Wars games. It's the old Alien vs Predator games, some of them anyway. They're all seen as, well, they've got a number of problems. These games are bad because they I can give you a few examples like the Simpsons games, Pixar ones like Ratatouille. They're all seen as universally bad, and it's been that way for a long while now. And basically, there are several reasons why games based on an existing franchise suffers from a lack of quality. It's because A, they're buggy as hell. They've got loads of game-breaking bugs. Not bugs which are funny like the ones in Fallout and Skyrim, but ones which make the game truly unplayable. They've got, the difficulty is really, really high or really, really low. So it's either way too hard or way too easy. There's no middle ground, there's no challenge. They can also be of a lesser quality because they were rushed. They're rushed. The games based on licensed media are rushed because they need to meet a deadline. A new movie is coming out and the studio is being like hounded to say, get this work done, get it finished on time. Doesn't matter how good it is, just makes it get finished on time. And these games are made because they're relying on the name of the property, whether it's like a TV show like Game of Thrones or an animated series like Adventure Time. These games sell because, well, they're projected to sell because of the names, because the names are powerful, the names are famous enough that any fan of those TV shows or films will buy simply because it is part of that it's got its own established franchise. And I am guilty of this because I bought several Naruto Shippuden games because I'm a big fan of Naruto Shippuden, and I bought them because they were simply Naruto Shippuden, which in fact I should have done my research first. And the other problem with licensed games is that they are made by a studio, by people who don't understand the property. They don't understand the TV show or the film that is based on, and they create something which seems odd, seems far strange, like a first-person shooter for a video game, for a television series which doesn't feature any shooting or violence or anything. They just use the genres of video games, whether it be a platformer or an FPS or an RPG or a racing game, and they use it. They don't use it to great effect. That's basically what I'm saying here. Is that they don't understand the type of humor or the type of horror or the type of drama or the setting, and they don't do any research on lore. And the game comes across as it was built by people who just didn't care. That all that matters to them is the name. And this is my biggest gripe with video games that are based on movies and TV series and all that, is that, let's take My Little Pony, for example. Before the Friendship of Magic era, before the bronies and that subculture existed, there was My Little Pony, and the ponies weren't as stylized as they are now. And the game came out on PlayStation, or Nintendo, the first generation of those consoles. And it seems like that game in particular was made by people who just wanted the money, who just wanted to milk money from little girls, who at the time it was a property for little girls before the bronies. They wanted to squeeze all that money from the little girls, who would go to their parents and say, can I buy this My Little Pony game because it's My Little Pony, I'm a fan of that, I want to buy this game. And it seemed they just didn't care, they just wanted for the money. They didn't care about the quality, they didn't care about the end user enjoyment. And I know video games is a business, as a business you need to make money, but if you don't make a quality product, then it's not going to sell, no matter how big the game, how big the name is. You could make a Star Wars game, but if it's not up to standard, if it seems like it's just there just to milk more money out of you, and they don't understand the Star Wars universe, then people aren't going to buy it. Just not going to buy it. My nose is itchy today. And I'm speaking about this because South Park, the Stick of Truth, gladly averts this trope of the problem of licensed video games, that video games are awful. And the Stick of Truth is nothing but amazing. I love the Stick of Truth. It's really a great game. And it averts the trope of video games are crap in a number of ways. First and foremost, the games are written and voiced by the creators of the show, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And it shows. The story is classic South Park. It's got the South Park gross out humor, which is famous for. It's got countless swear words. It's also got that satirical bent. There's a lot of references to video games, video game culture, and other high fantasy settings. Lots of references to Skyrim. The makers of the game did say that Skyrim was an influence, and other games like Dragon's Quest, and I also see influences of Final Fantasy as well. Thankfully, the South Park, the Stick of Truth, averts this trope of video games being crap, and it does this in a number of ways. One way is that it was written and voiced by the makers of the show, Trey Parker, Matt Stone. I hope I've got that the right way round. And you can tell, the writing feels like a real South Park episode. It's got the trademark humour, the gross out humour. It's also got the satirical aspect of South Park. There are lots of references to Skyrim, to Final Fantasy, to Dragon Quest, to video games. And it pokes fun of the tropes associated with those video games, most notably in the section where you're on the alien ship. Spoiler alert. And you find video logs, and it's commented on that those video logs are just there for filler purposes, just to flesh out the world, and they are in fact useless. Several nice touches like that. And the voices, they're the real voice actors from the show. Obviously, Trey Parker, Matt Stone. I almost got them mixed up just then. And the female voices, they sound like their animated counterparts. And it looks like South Park, and the game is presented in a sort of like 2.5D. It's a 3D world, and you can move up, down, left, and right, but it's still like 2D of South Park, and it actually uses a 3D engine because the show, even though it looks 2D, is actually made in a 3D program called Elias Maya. And it truly does look like South Park. It's got the cutout style. You can even see like the texture of like the fake paper. And it's all high res, and it still makes it like such an urban environment like South Park seem alive and colourful and crisp, and something that's a joy to explore. So it sounds like South Park and it looks like South Park. The characters, and this is the most important bit, why I think this game succeeds, what other video games based on licenses don't, is that the characters act like how they would. Cartman is an asshole. Butters is still cute little Butters, and the characters act like how they would act like in the series. And I am of that age where I remember the original South Park games, which came out in the late 90s. The first person shooter, the weird quiz game, and the racing game. And didn't look like South Park at all. It was because of the technology at the time, they could only do like a 3D version of the South Park characters, and it just looked like, it looked wrong. It didn't look like South Park. It looked like the episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes into Free World. It looks all poppy-outy and it looks rather strange. So it didn't work out then, but I think this time, because the creators saw how bad those games were, said no, they wanted a more control over it. And so they actually sat down and wrote the story and forget the game mechanics and forget the RPG mechanics, having been influenced by games like Skyrim and Dragon Quest, as I've mentioned. So it's all really good stuff. It's all well written like that. And it's really, really funny and really, really gross. Especially the sequences where you go up Mr. Slave's anus and the abortion clinic and things of that nature. So the gameplay is like an RPG, set like a high fantasy world. Well, I say that it's kind of like a high fantasy world in what a child sees it as. So instead of swords, they have wooden swords, and the rock of contemplation is just simply a rock. So it's presented as a way how a child sees a high fantasy world. They're LARPing, live action role playing. So the costumes aren't as, realistic in a high fantastical way as The Witcher 3, for example, but they're made with like bits and pieces like sports equipment, protective dresses, and the bows and arrows. The projectiles are just like dodgeballs and lawn darts and mundane things, but they add an element of fantasy with the strap-ons and patches, which you can apply to weapons and armor, which are basically like buffs or enchantment in a traditional RPG, which gives you like fire damage, protects against attacks, shielding, that sort of thing, armor, and like there are gross attacks and screwed attacks, which give you buffs. And I should mention the combat is turn-based, like Final Fantasy, but unlike Final Fantasy, you select, say if you want to beat up on an enemy character, you select a character, you select a weapon, and you select a character, and a little glint, like a white glint will show up, or a pink, green glint, and when the white glint flickers, you press a button and it does the attack. So it's a mixture of turn-based combat and not exactly real-time, but it was really interesting. It reminded me very much of those flash up RPGs found on websites other than Facebook, you know the ones. And the funny thing is, when I started playing the game, I was kind of like disappointed because the combat seemed so simple, but as you progress through the games, you unlock more magic attacks, more weapons, weapons including dildos, because this is South Park after all, stronger attacks, more combos, You unlock perks, which gives you unique abilities and defenses, and once you unlock more things and more abilities and play as a different class, then you find that the combat is surprisingly really deep. There's a lot of attacks you can do, a lot of interesting things you can do, a lot of different summons, and the summons are based on characters on the show, like the Chinese restaurant owner and Mr. Hanky and Jesus Christ. They're all making an appearance as summons, and there are different classes like warrior, thief, mage, and Jew, because this is South Park, and it does seem refreshing. Not only does South Park feel like a good South Park game, but it also feels like a good RPG game. And speaking about RPGs, there's a lot of customization. Even though you pick your name and how your character looks, you can, as you go through the story, play through the game, you can collect wigs and facial hair and dye your clothes and all sorts of different costumes. Some based in the show, some based in like a kid's version of the fantasy game. Some obscene like South Park, and there's a lot of customization. Different weapons, different patches, different skills, different abilities. It's really deep. And I should mention the music. The music is great. It feels epic. It really does. It's like a high fantasy music that would seem not out of place in an Elder Scrolls game. It's really well done. And the music also comes from the show as well. Like the classic songs of the Chimpokemon theme, Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls, the anime style theme song, the Princess Kenny theme song. It's all in there. Most of the classic songs from the TV series, even O Canada, has a brief mention. So the music is really well done. The other gameplay thing I should mention, there are loads of references to South Park, loads of references to past episodes, and you recognise locations from the show, like the school, like the golf hangout. You even recognise the downtown buildings, and it's so wonderful because the game actually wanted me to do a rewatch of South Park, to watch all these classic episodes of South Park, so I can say, oh, I recognise that. And the other thing, it's even in the smallest details, like small subtle references to Kenny's Mysterio persona, Professor Chaos, references to past episodes, and also in the collectibles you collect, like the Chimpokemon, for example, but also the trash, the so-called vendor trash, references episodes, like Bieber dolls and figurines from the show, USB sticks. It does a very wonderful job of referencing South Park. It feels like it's truly grabbed its material and actually embraced it. And I think the RPG, the setting of a role-playing game, works. It really works. And it just seems like the whole exploring South Park and the combat and the magic. By the way, the magic is based on farts, the power of farts, and they reference Skyrim constantly in that. And the fact that, did I mention the healing potions are cheesy poofs, and the mana potions are burritos, and that sort of thing. And I feel like the RPG setting truly works for South Park. It truly combines the aspect of exploration and collectibles and combat, and the genre of the RPG just fits an animated series like South Park properly than the first-person shooters or the quiz games of the old South Parks. And it truly feels like what the boys would actually get up to. It's really well done. You play as a character called the New Kid, or Spoilert Douchebag, as he's called. And he's the traditional silent protagonist. And of course, you can customize them to how you see fit. As I mentioned, all different loads of costumes, and you can dye those costumes in different color, different wigs and makeups and glasses, all sorts of things. It's up to you. And basically the story is very simple. South Park, there are two factions. The humans headed by Cartman and the elves headed by Kyle. And it's a battle between the two over the title of Stick of Truth. And the player character gets embroiled into that war. But also, like true South Park fashion, it escalates and the government gets involved, and a lot of bizarre and gross and violent things happen. And by the end of it, everything is so exaggerated. It's gone to now like save the world from the great evil proportions, like classic fantasy games. And most of the attacks, I should mention, like the electricity attacks and the magic attacks, are based on the kids' imaginations, what they imagine, because it's all LARPing to them. It's all make pretend. It's all fantasy. No pun intended. As they're playing through this fantasy world, they're making like they're saying, "Oh, I've got electricity damage," but also, what am I saying? This, I don't know what I'm saying. So the basic story is pretty simplistic but really fun. I really enjoyed the quests and the missions that you go to. And the game actually actively rewards you for discovering friends. There's a friend system in the game where you make... So the story is pretty basic, really, but I found it very enjoyable. I found the quests enjoyable. I found the characters that you meet are enjoyable. All of them from the South Park TV show. I think there are more than like 120 friends, and the game has a friend system where you meet several characters from South Park, and they can be your friend, depending on whether you finish a quest for them or how popular you are, or if you defeat them in battle, they become your friend. And with those friends, it actually unlocks perks, which unlocks abilities. So the game actually encourages you to meet the other characters from South Park. And although you don't play it as the main four, as Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Cartman, that can actually come to you, excuse me, in your party, like the Final Fantasy sense of the word, where if you enter battle phase, you can command them to heal you or attack. And the other thing, the game does a great thing of the attacks themselves also reference South Park. An example of this is Eric Cartman's special ability, where he has the V-chip, which was in the movie Bigger, Longer, Uncut, and he attacks his enemies with like a firebolt, and that itself is a reference to South Park. So it's extremely well done. And I should, on the gameplay, should mention that there are a range of difficulties from casual to hardcore. And it's a destructible world, not fully destructible, but you can knock over signs and trash cans and that sort of things to collect the vendor trash. excuse me. And also Canada, I should mention Canada. It's deviates from most of the game, where it's like a Dragon Quest, old school Final Fantasy, 8-bit sort of thing, where you explore Canada and of course Vancouver and Montreal, close. Because this is a video game like that, it was just a unique change, and the music is sort of like MIDI, MIDI, and sort of like a reference to old 8-bit gameplay games of old, which I like. So now we come to the elephant in the room. It's censorship. And in the version I got, the Australian version, several mini-games were censored. Not cutscenes, but actual mini-games were cut. And it flashes to a screen where it's got a crying koala. And it actually details what scene that we cut. So it's a little take that from the makers of the video game to the censorship authorities. And on one hand, I feel disappointed because we've lost entire minigames because of the censorship. On the other hand, is it worth it? Because I did some reading up, and what was cut out was some abortion minigames and some scenes where the player character, which is like a 10 to 11 year old kid, gets violated by the aliens. And it's a cartoon, it's done in a while, and it lessens out the impact. But is it really worth it? Would you really want to play that section of the video game where you perform an abortion on a male? No, I don't think many people would. So, even though I'm usually I'll be upset if it was any other game like an Elder Scrolls and cut content was cut out because of censure, I'll be upset because there's less enjoyment. But in this case, I don't think it's worth it. I think yes, it is censored, but in the other way, it's to take that moments of the crying koala or the face palming statue of David for the European console players. Take that away. Okay, my final thoughts. I think South Park is a very, very good game. The only bad thing that I see is that it's a little bit too short. The game roughly lasts for 10 hours. And those 10 hours are funny and gross and really enjoyable, but they're just too short. At the end of the game, after we finished the final boss, I was feeling I wanted more content. And I think the makers of the South Park video game are not into DLC. They don't believe it, so there's not going to be any DLC. And it just seems so short to me. I wanted more content, I wanted more quests, I wanted more things to do, but there just isn't there. After you completed all the quests, after you collected all the collectibles, after you've done all the hidden trophies and achievements, the only thing that will make you want to replay the game is another difficulty mode, changing your class, and perhaps to revisit the comedy again. But that's it. So it's a really short game, and that is my only disappointment, my only gripe with South Park: The Stick of Truth. But aside from that, I credit as South Park: The Stick of Truth as one of the few games that are released in the last couple of years. Alien Isolation is another Star Wars Battlefront where that video games that are based on licensed products are actually good. And I like it that we are now living in an era where the games that are based on TVs and films do actually have a chance of actually being good. That they're not crap anymore. That we don't have to put up with badly implemented first-person shooter mechanics or any games that seem like they were just in it for the money, any low-quality games. And I think that South Park: The Stick of Truth is a very good South Park game, a very good RPG game, and something that, if you like the humor and you have the stomach for the gross out and the violent bits, then yes, you should play it. It's a very good game and you will enjoy yourselves, even if you're not a fan of the show. So, South Park: The Stick of Truth. I like the game, I really do. Thank you very much for watching, and good night.